recording. There we go. Everything seems to be working reasonably quick today. All right. So this is where we've left off, right? We've started building our room. And really, if you just want to take advantage of extruding regular polygons and just with the Control E and using loop cuts to kind of put your edge loops in, that is all stuff you could do, right? I did show you a little bit of the extrude manifold to allow you to easily create corners like this. That's an actual extrude option, right? Extrude manifold. And we've seen that. We saw it on our mainframe, right? It's one of those things that you guys don't have to use if you don't want to, right? If you just want to add loop cuts and extrude and keep everything quads, guys, that is totally fine. The extrude manifold is an option available to you. It's actually a pretty new feature, right? If you don't have 2.9 installed, you won't find extrude manifold, right? It's one of those things where it's new to 2.9. And it's kind of neat. It's a neat thing that makes it work a little more like SketchUp if you want to, but it's not really one of those things that's going to make a better model for you. It just adds a different way to do it, right? So it's kind of just a different way. So if you don't want to do extrude manifold, that is totally cool. You just want to use regular extrudes and regular shaping, that's fine. Remember, we did start to talk about snapping, and I did briefly talk about it a little more the other day, because remember, there are other snapping features, right? So if I turn the magnet on right here, right, because there's this little magnet up here, it's your snap tools. We can go in here, and we do have a lot of these options. Now, increment, if you have absolute grid snap off, is interesting because what it does, I'll go to 3 for face mode. And let me see if I can find something that's not exactly on a grid unit. They're all actually pretty much on grid units now, it looks like. But remember, if you do have something like increment off or on, or absolute grid snap off, what it does is it just goes by the, ultimately by the kind of 1 unit increment, right? If this isn't, like if I turn snap off and I move this to say like about there, right? And then I turn it on, you'll notice it snaps by a unit still, but it doesn't snap to the grid, right? So that's kind of neat that it has kind of that increment snap control function, which is kind of cool. But if you want it to snap exactly to the grid, and I think somebody's got their microphone on, so I'd probably make sure to turn your microphone off, guys. But if you want, you can turn absolute grid snap on, of course, and that allows you to snap exactly to the grid units. So this gives you that extra precision when you need it for modeling, right? Okay, I'm going to go in here really quick to our meeting, see who's... looks like everybody's mics are... That's kind of weird. Somebody's microphone seems to be on, but I can't see which one it is. So I just double check, guys. Anyways, let me go back. So I want to talk a little about the snapping tools. And of course, you even have the ability to snap a vertex to a vertex, right? So if I go in here, I turn vertices on. You'll notice that you can snap to a vertex. But you'll notice that you have to move your cursor, right? So if I use middle mouse button, you want your cursor to touch whatever you want it to snap, right? So you can snap vertices if you need to, just like you would in Maya. It even works with this constraint, right? So if I actually click on, say, the red axis handle, and I move my cursor over it, you see how it snaps exactly to that position there. The nice thing is it's a little more clear and easy to see, but it actually works a lot like Maya's in that case. But one of the neat things is you do get things like edge, right? And so I can snap to edges. And you can even snap to edge centers, right? It's not going to usually work on the ones that touch the vertex, right? So like this one it'll work for, that one it'll work for, right? But usually kind of this one and this one and this one it won't work for, right? Because it's right on there. But it is kind of neat to have that ability to snap these different components. It even works for edges as well, right? And you can do middle mouse button or just that right? And you see how you can kind of get it to work for those as well. So kind of interesting. So you can see that the snap tools are honestly pretty nice in Blender, right? A bit better than Maya's, right? Maya's aren't bad at all, but Blender's definitely got a bit more options for stuff. I just wanted to kind of talk about those a little bit more and just make sure you guys know that you have these in video form. We've talked about them a little bit outside of the video form. All right, so I think we'll go back to grid for now. And I'll turn my magnet off. But I just wanted to address the snapping tools a little bit more. And you do get some extra options, right? There is the snap to edge center. Things like the face snap actually gives you some cool ability to do make live stuff. It's overall pretty good snapping tools, pretty nice snapping tools. All right, so I just wanted to talk about that and address that a little bit more. I'm not quite ready to talk to you guys and show you guys a Boolean yet, but what we can do is make this a little bit more futuristic a room, right? So what I could do is I could easily go to 2 for edge mode, right? And I can grab these 2 edges here, and I could bevel those, right? Control B for bevel. Middle mouse button to drag, and that gives me a nice kind of bevel there. Now remember, when you bevel, it does bring up, really any tool you do in Blender, it will generally bring up kind of a little options box kind of down here in the left corner, right? And if you click on that, and you see my bevel still active, if you did another middle mouse drag, it would actually do a second bevel on those. And if you wanted to control segments while in this bevel, you have to keep holding your mouse button down and hit S, right? But you don't have to do that, right? Because you can bring up this options box, and you can tell the segments to be up here. And you see how the segments give it those extra kind of vertices for rounding? And also, you can still adjust your width from right here, right? So remember, this little kind of menu, you click on it, it opens it up, and you got a lot of options there. Now, in this case, our mid-ring for sharp is fine. And we're really just kind of playing with width and segments, right? And that's just cool because it gives us a little more rounded shape in those corners. I think I might even do it on this one here as well. And remember, in Blender, you don't have to turn the tool off. See how bevel's still on? So I can middle mouse click drag to make it even bigger bevel, right? And like I said, I'm still holding down middle mouse button, but if I switch to S, it'll start to do segments, right? And of course, this bevel options box is right here. And if you want it to be wider, you can still make it wider there, right? And in this case, maybe more segments. So remember, the bevel tool in Blender is quite good, quite nice. Just want to make sure you guys got to see a little bit more. We'll worry about the smooth shading on this a little bit later on. So now we have something a little bit more kind of interesting and dynamic, right? I'm going to save this really quick. I hope it doesn't take forever. So just want to bevel to get these corners on here, make it a little more round, a little more futuristic, sci-fi. And you'll notice we're having big n-gons here, right? You notice this polygon right here is a big n-gon. But you'll notice it's staying planar, right? This is one of those instances where an n-gon is very, very useful, right? Usually we avoid n-gons, right? Big polygons they're larger than quads, right? You can see if we actually counted the vertices, this guy's probably like a 10, 11 sided polygon, right? Just the number of vertices that it has right here. But in this case, since it's flat, it's planar, and we're not putting this in sub-Ds, and it's not going to animate or deform or change shape, we can kind of get away with it. So one of the areas you can kind of break the non-n-gon rule is architectural stuff. Furniture, buildings. You can tend to get away with n-gons more on that stuff. If you're building a car or a spaceship that's got a lot of curvature to it, which next term's project when we come back from Christmas break will be a car, no, we're going to stick with quads. Characters, creatures, we stick with quads. In fact, in general, sticking with quads, you're going to be a happier modeler most of the time. But there are occasionally those times where big n-gons are okay. And it's kind of one of these instances, right? So that gives us a nice bevel there. I'm going to do a little bit more with the roof in a minute here, but I wanted to show you guys booleans, right? Because that's kind of one of the new things I want to get you guys to see. Most of the rest of the stuff is stuff we've kind of already talked about a little bit here and there, if not having it in a formal video lecture, and are just reinforcing those tools because we've been trying to work mostly low res with bevels, right? Because remember, things generally have rounded corners, even if they're small rounded corners, right? Because otherwise you'd get cut and, bleed out. You don't think these things all have rounded edges, but they do. They're just small rounded edges. And that's what our bevel tool does for us when we're not working with subdivisional surfaces. And we've seen that on this particular project, we're working with a lot of low-res stuff because I don't want you guys to feel like you use subdivisional surface modifier all the time, right? It's definitely useful as a shortcut for certain things, but other things it's not really appropriate. So when you do a lot of environment modeling and prop modeling, you're going to work more with low reses and bevels. Not always the case, right? Sometimes the sub-D is fine, but all right. So that's looking cooler, a little more futuristic, a little more dynamic for us. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you guys booleans today, right? So what is a boolean, right? And that's B-O-O-L-E-A-N, boolean, right? And what you're doing is you can actually kind of take one shape and either union it to another or subtract it from another or even create intersections, right? So this is one of those cases where we could take like a circle shape, right, out of the wall. Now, yeah, technically if we have enough edges, right, circle, the actual circle feature will do it in Blender, right? We've seen that. That's cool. But there are times when you have a specific shape that you want to cut out of another shape. And that would be the case of like doing some windows or some doors. So what I want to do here is I really want to spend, and I've still got 10 minutes for this, so should be able to get through this and maybe do a little bit to the kind of ceiling. But I want to do a boolean. Now, I do want to eventually create a door, but I feel like I'm going to create a couple of windows also. And I feel like we'll keep those windows pretty simple and make them circle shapes. So I'm going to go 4 for object mode, right? And I can go to add. And you'll see in the mesh menu, there is cylinder, right? Cylinder. So I'm going to click on cylinder, and that's going to create a cylinder shape for me. Now you'll notice that I just created this, and you'll see that even down here, in this case, I just created the primitive. I haven't done anything to it. I haven't moved it anywhere, right? I haven't done any of that stuff. So you'll notice that it's still in object mode. I haven't touched it. So if I go to the add cylinder feature down here, right? Because remember, pretty much any of your options for a currently activated tool are going to be this guy right down here, right? So we left click on that. And in this case, I don't really think I want this to be that many vertices. I think I'll take it down to, say, maybe 28 just to make it a little simpler. So there we go. It just makes it have 28 this direction, because we do want it to be decently rounded, right? Too low, and it's going to look like an octagon, right? And unless you're making a stop sign, we want it to be a little bit denser. So vertices, that's kind of your diameter around this way. In this case, though, I also want to rotate it so that it's going to be kind of this side. So in this case, I want to rotate along the red, which is your x-axis, right? Remember, red's x, y is green, blue is z. So I can go to rotation, x, and I could type in 90 degrees. You see that rotates it on its side? So remember, you actually have location and rotation controls down here that can allow you to kind of adjust that a bit. So remember, you create a cylinder, right? Just add mesh cylinder. It drops this in. You go down to the left corner to click on that, and your options are there. Now in this case, I'm going to close that up, and I'm going to hit W for move, and I'm going to move it over a bit. And I'm going to hit R for scale, so I can scale it down a bit as well. Something like this, right? So remember, W's move, R's scale, and I'll kind of get that about there. Now, I'm also going to duplicate this and kind of move it over here, right? We could always create a new one as well, but in this case, I'm just going to duplicate. So Control D, and I can duplicate that, and I'll move it over to here. Let me actually do this one more time really quick, because I accidentally clicked and moved it somewhere where I didn't want to. So just Control D. Let's click it there. And you see how you can kind of just click it without moving it, and it puts it right in the same position. Move it over here. And then, of course, we can hit E for rotate. Wait for it to catch up. And, of course, if we want, we could rotate it this direction. For whatever reason, the move tool's still on. Come on. But anyways, you also see right here, you can control these right here as well. So if you click on that little, so remember we have that little kind of triangle, this little V pointing out right there, guys. So if you click on that, that opens this up, and you can see you have some of these controls right here as well, right? So this could easily be one of those things where, you know, we can rotate this manually if we want. And now you'll see the rotate tool finally came up. And I could actually type in the 90 degrees I want there. There we go. But you can also type in these values here as well, particularly the object level. So you'll notice that once I click the rotate tool, it finally showed up down here. And you'll see you can type in your angle there. So you have that ability. Man, that is loud. You have that ability to numerically type in a lot of these values for this stuff, right? And so now I've got these kind of set up where I want them to be. And what I want to do is I want to cut them out, right? That's what a Boolean does. It takes one shape and it cuts it out of another shape, right? So in this case, what I could do is I'm still in object mode. I'll hit Q just to go to regular selection. And I'm going to select the, and I could actually do this for both. So I could actually grab both of these objects, right? The cylinders. So see how I just left clicked on one, shift left click on another. And remember, if you right click, there is an option called join, right? And we've seen this not as much recently, but we've seen this before. Remember, you can actually, in the object mode, join objects together. And that makes them one object. So now you see how when you click one, it clicks the other. But you'll notice they don't have to touch, right? They can be one object without touching each other. In fact, if I go to 3 for face mode, I can do that select linked, and you see how it only selects one set of polygons or the other because they're not directly connected. But in this case, I'm going to select the room now. So 4 for object mode. Click on the room. And I'm going to go to the blue wrench, right? Because remember, over here, we kind of have our properties and modifiers for pretty much everything, right? The blue wrench is our modifiers. And I can go to add modifier. And you'll see there's one called Boolean, right up here, Boolean, right? So we'll click that on. And you'll notice that it actually has an object option here, right? So I can click on that, pick the cylinder. Now, at this point, though, I'll have to hit Alt-X, right, to see what's going on there properly. So it's actually cutting those shapes out. Having said that, though, you could use union or even intersect, right? So it's a modifier that you can adjust on the fly. Also, if I want to, I can go back to the cylinders, click on those. And remember, there's that orange box, right? That little orange guy right above the blue wrench. And you'll see in there, there is the viewport display. And we can go to display as wire. And what it does is it takes the cylinders and just puts them into wireframe mode. And you can see what the Boolean does is it actually cuts out that difference shape. Now you'll notice it's kind of going on one side versus the other. So we can always go back to the modifier, right? And we could try union for a different result, right? But union and difference do something pretty similar. In this case, I'll just use union because it kind of keeps that outside there. But you'll notice it cuts this shape out, right? Now, what's really cool about this, since this is a modifier, if I go back and I grab the cylinders, I can move these cylinders up or down to kind of adjust their positions. Or even if I wanted to scale, I could scale, right? Or even go to 3 for face mode, select linked, W for move, and you see I can move just that one. So one of the cool things about Blender's Boolean modifier is that it's actually a procedural modifier, right? So you can actually do the Boolean and still adjust it later on after the fact. In fact, if I select both these and I do my select linked, I turn scale on, this will kind of scale them all out in a weird way. But remember, you can go to the one that looks like a chain link, right? And set that to individual origins, and then each one will scale on their own, independent of each other, right? So remember, these actually give you your ability to kind of tell the center for the manipulation to be different, and even the orientation. So individual origins can kind of be cool, because it makes each one kind of work on their own, right? So I can make those smaller if I want to a little bit. Medium point's a good one to have on by default. Then go back to forward to object mode. And what we can do is we can click on, because you'll notice that the Boolean modifier is not on the cylinders, it's on the room, right? And then we just pick the cylinders. Now, you can, of course, go right to here, and you could apply, And now that's properly applied. And if we delete these, you'll see you have the proper windows. Now in this case, you see the normals are flipped outward, so I can just go to 3 for face mode, and I could grab those faces. Remember, Shift adds to selection. Up arrow is your more, right? Remember, select, more or less, up and down arrow. And then, of course, mesh, normals, flip. And in this case, I'll just go back in here and I'll delete these faces. Hit delete, faces. And now we've got actual window openings. All right? Now, at this point, it's 9:30. That's probably a great place to save and stop this recording.